Hello, everybody. This is number 14, take 4 on Rome, ancient Rome. So, in the beginning, we know the Senate started in 753 BC, or BCE, if you like, and ended in 1461 AD, which is a remarkable history of 2,214 years. At the beginning, the Senate didn't really have legislative authority as we think of it now. However, it was implanted in the culture, and people did what they said they should do. And along with customs and traditions, which were unexplained and from maybe the time before writing, who knows, they already had people who tried to interpret laws. The next event is probably 730 BC, which is when we think that Romulus may have been the first king of Rome, although Romulus is legendary. But the idea of using Romulus as the first king is, shall we say, a good point that we put in the history to understand what went on afterwards. So the story is that Romulus appointed 30 Curiae, who were the patriarchs of the 30 families in Rome. And as Plato mused in his book on laws, they would agree on what laws they had in common, hence the expression common law. They would help the king curate, which is where common word, common root for curiae and curate, the city. And they would give the king advice on how to curate the city. And now the king didn't need to make edicts anymore, which were personal orders. He could now make decrees, which are an order made on the advice of a council where more than one person has discussed the issue. So now we have customs and traditions, the Senate, and we have the Curiae and the king. So we already have several sources of laws, and the first thing that philosophers realized that it didn't really matter where the law came from. You either had to obey it or else. So that was equality of the law, although because there were a lot of slaves, there wasn't equality before the law. But nonetheless, they did figure out that the laws themselves were equal and that they applied to everybody, no matter who issued them. So the idea of we the people, and then signed on the bottom by all the governors as the top authority, we the people, or the emperor, or the queen, or whoever at the top generally signs it on the advice and consent of Parliament, National Assembly, Legislative Assembly of your province, or the state government. You might put the governor on the advice of the state government, or the president on the advice of Congress, or even we the people, which is a great way to start. That's the authority of the document of we the people declare this, and then all the rules follow after that. So that tradition has been preserved in our law, that you have an authority, and now the authority is kind of starting to become vague, that it isn't really a person who holds a scepter or carries an orb. It's a constitutional concept that thing, which is more than all of us, is the ultimate authority. Well, in Canada, we say one nation under God and the rule of law. So that's, you don't have to believe in God, but you do have to believe in the rule of law if you want to survive as a free person in Canada. So after kings ran for 200 and so years, in 509 BC, Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus became the first two consuls of Rome. There was no title of consul before that. And they, especially Brutus, and this is the first Brutus, made everybody swear that Rome would never be run by one person again. And of course, you don't really hear about that part too often when histories of Rome are made by on the authority of kings and presidents, where you have one person. That's not good politics to tell people that the Roman Revolution was a refusal to be ruled by one person anymore. So 2 consuls were set up, and they had to be elected every year by the people. And the other plebiscite was on the death penalty. So if there's anybody facing the death penalty, the whole city of Rome had to vote on whether or not they got executed. So the idea of the republic was to have less power concentrated in the hands of one person. So after being elected every year, the consuls alternated power every month. And even when the one was in power, which was called holding Imperium, the other one had a veto on his activity. Holding Imperium means that you have the sword for the entire city. You are the leader of the military, of the armed forces. You also are directly able to punish the bad and reward the good. And you're also able to appoint judges. And soon these tribunals started to make laws. And the consuls survived. The position of consul survived even when the empire took over with Caesar and the Caesar Augustus, because the other Caesar got from the descendant of the original Brutus. Now Marcus Junius Brutus was the guy who stabbed Julius Caesar, and he's the famous one. And he claimed to be the descendant of the original Lucius Junius Brutus. And what Julius Caesar had done was made himself dictator for life. And I think that just really got Marcus Brutus's goat, because that was the betrayal of the entire Republic of Rome. So I think it was, there may be a lot of current reasons which are given for why Brutus did what he did, but that seems to be like a family feud that seems to have gone back some 400 years. So maybe Julius Caesar should have thought twice about calling himself dictator for life, at least in that situation. So now we have the consuls. There are proconsuls now who govern the provinces, and they also had courts. That was one of their jobs, was to do justice and administration. As one of my main criticisms of historical books is they always talk about the armies and the territory they conquered and the politics and all this stuff they dug up about society. What about the laws? If you have a picture of the laws, you can sort of tell what most people would think was right and wrong, or sort of what their activities were. And as I said before, if you study the modern criminal code, you could write modern novels about life now. Or if you studied Roman law in the Codex, which is also known as the Corpus Juris Civilis, and that was written by Justinian I and Theodora, more than likely, in 533 AD. And he was the last Roman emperor who grew up speaking Latin. And of course, if you look at the format of it, it's, let's just say, somewhat like the Torah. And I'm sure that, let's just say was some confirmation bias, because Justinian I was a Christian emperor. And of course, the Bible was by then much more considered much more as the law than it was before the other Roman emperors who liked to slaughter Christians. And in fact, that was one of the first jobs the Christian emperors gave to the church, was to feed the poor. They would do the dole, right? The dole was a long-standing thing in the Rome, because you have to feed the people, and that was one of the roles of the priests. So anyway, that's a little bit of the beginning of Rome, and we'll definitely talk about this more later.